All right, so this is just a quick introductory video to Module 2, Lesson 1. We're going to talk about slope today. Slope is a concept that's very important for any business, government agency, anybody that makes decisions about the future will often use slope to help them make those decisions. It tells us how fast things are changing with our graph, which is very important. We're going to talk about it in the context of linear equations today and the graphs of linear equations. There's a few different ways that we can draw lines. We can draw lines like this. And this line, I would say, is going up as we go from left to right across it. We call this an increasing line. Increasing lines are going to have positive slopes, okay? We can draw a line like this that's decreasing as we go from left to right, and that's going to have a negative slope. A couple of other kind of special cases we can have. We can have a horizontal line. Looks like this. Horizontal lines have zero slopes. And then finally, our last kind of special case that we'll run into from time to time is a vertical line. Run straight up and down like this. Vertical lines, we say, have undefined slopes. So those are kind of the four cases that we can run into. And really, we're just going to decide which of those cases based on whether it's an increasing or decreasing line, unless it's a horizontal or vertical line, okay? So those are our four possibilities, and we can calculate slope of a couple of different ways. Okay, so if I'm looking at a graph like this, the first thing that jumps out at me about the line that I've drawn on this graph is that it's increasing as I go from left to right. This tells me right away that the slope is going to be positive, right? And then the next thing that jumps out at me is that I can look at this graph and I can kind of figure out how far up and then over I have to move on this line to go from the first point there to the second point here. You'll notice I went up 1 unit and then over 2 units, from 2 to 3 on my y value, and then from 2 to 4 on my x values there, okay? We call these values the rise and the run of our graph. The rise is how far we go up or down, and then the run is how far we go to the right. And if we put these values together, we'll get the actual value of our slope. So this one, we went up 1 and then 2 to the right. So my rise is 1 and my run is 2. And so my slope for this particular line is going to be 1/2. Again, we talked about how this is an increasing line as we go from left to right. So it's not surprising that we got a positive value here, okay? But that is the value of our slope. There's a couple of ways that we can calculate this. What I did here was I used the graph. I figured out my rise and my run just kind of by counting on our graph. And this is a perfectly legitimate way to get your slope, especially if you have a graph already. But there is another way to get your slope of a line as well. If I take these 2 points, 4, 3, and 2, 2, okay, I can use this thing called the slope formula to calculate the slope between these two points. Okay, it looks like this. Slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and we can just plug into these variables here with the values from our points to calculate our slope. So now there's a couple of choices for how to approach this problem, but the key is consistency with how you set the thing up, right? You want to pick a point and you want to make it your first point, and then you want to pick your other point and make it your second point. So if I'm going to pick this 4, 3 here as one of my points, it doesn't really matter which one. I just have to be consistent. So I'm going to make this x1 and y1, and then that makes this second point over here x2 and y2. And then I'm just going to plug into my equation. So if I do that, y2 is 2, minus y1 is 3, x2 is 2, minus x1 is 4. I do my calculation here. 2 minus 3 is -1. 2 minus 4 is -2. We know a negative divided by negative makes a positive. And so we'll get that value that way as well. So we have a couple of different options for how to get the slope. We can use the graph. We can get our rise and our run. Sometimes we call this the geometric definition of slope. Or we can calculate the slope using this formula, this y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and we can get our slope that way. And we get the same answer, so it certainly does work. All right, so next I want to talk for just a second about this thing called slope-intercept form for a line. Hopefully you've seen this before. looks like this: y equals mx plus b. You'll notice the y is on one side by itself. That's the fact here that makes this in slope-intercept form. So if you don't have that y by itself, you want to solve for y in order to get this all set up. But the reason why this is so nice for us is if we have a linear equation like this, we can read the slope right off of the equation that we've got there. This m value is my slope, and I can get it right away. So if I give you an equation like negative 3x minus 7y equals 5, and I ask you to find the slope of a line like this, I can do this without too much trouble. I'm just going to solve for y, get that y on one side by itself. So I'd start here by moving this 3x over to the other side. Get rid of those. Solve for y. So we'll just divide by negative 7 everywhere. So y equals negative 3/7 x plus negative 5/7, right? And my goal here, my question was to find the slope. This is it right here. We can just read it right off of our x term. The coefficient of x is going to be my slope. So we'll use m to as our variable for slope most of the time. So m is equal to negative 3/7 is the slope that we're looking for there. Okay, so if we have a linear equation and we want to find the slope from that linear equation, this is another option for us. We can just take our equation, we can solve it for y. If we can get that y on one side by itself, we can read the slope right off the graph. Okay, so those are kind of the big ideas. Hopefully that'll be enough to get you started with this first lesson. Okay. If you have any trouble at all when you're in your homework, just click on the help button up there and choose Ask My Instructor. Shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you're having trouble with and help any way that I can throughout the course. So let me know what I can do to help. You guys have a good day. Bye.